Hello there, you absolute legends. Emma McElhinney here with Piss Off Perimenopause and the musings of a bullshit queenager. I am here to ruin your misconceptions about perimenopause, fat loss, and kick midlife in the face. So if you think your 40s are a drag, think again. Because every week I am going to be stripping down the myths about perimenopause. I'm serving you raw, unfiltered truths about your health and smashing misconceptions about fat loss. And a whole lot more. So if you thought you knew midlife, you don't know the half of it. Aging is inevitable, but getting old is a choice. So buckle up, grab a glass of something yummy, and let's get to it. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Piss Off Perimenopause and the musings of a bullshit queenager. I am your host, Emma McElhinney, and today we have the very lovely Jayne Hughes from Jayne Hughes Coaching, who is a mindset coach she helps busy working women, mums, with overwhelm and stress. So as you can imagine, I need her in my pocket. We all need her in our pockets. So welcome to the podcast, Jayne. It's lovely to have you here. How are you?
Hello, very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So a little bit of background. So Jayne came in and worked with my membership ladies. That must have been about a month ago. Yeah, it must have been about a month ago now. And it was such a wonderful session. And when I was sitting watching the ladies on the Zoom, and I noticed myself nodding along to everything, I was like, oh shit, we maybe need to get Jayne on the podcast here. What she's saying is absolutely resonating with every single person. So we're going to talk a little bit about what she does and why, you know, dealing with overwhelm and stress, actually dealing with overwhelm and stress is super important and why we need to consider it more in our lives. So I think the first place to start is get a little background about you. So how did all this come about? How did you come working with overwhelm and stress? Because I've all got it. I'm sure you have it.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I actually came at it from a physical perspective to start off with. Like I was a teacher, I was a mum, and anyone who teaches knows it's like a full-on job. I know we get the holidays and stuff, which is great, but it's very, very busy in term time. And I was just getting chronic migraines all the time and just felt like rubbish. Like before I had my kids, I was pretty good at like managing things. And then I had my son, and I remember everything just came to a head and I just felt like just overwhelmed all the time. Like there was just so much to do and to think about constantly. And I started to get migraines all the time, wasn't able to sort of like prioritize my health and look after myself the way that I wanted to, because I just constantly felt like I didn't have enough time to do everything. And I know that that's like a really common complaint for a lot of mums too. And so originally I was like, right, I need to do something about my health. So I wanted to explore other avenues of being able to do alternative work as well. So it's like, I'm going to look at health coaching because I'd always been really like, I'm a biologist. So I'd always been really interested in like the biology of nutrition and the body and stuff like that. My dad had had heart attacks when I was younger. So I'd always read up a lot about that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go and get qualified as a health coach, sort my life out, see what's happening. And I think the more I sort of worked on it and the more I started to kind of work with other people and clients as well, it was like, it's actually the stress that gets in the way of people making the changes that they want to make to their health. Because most of us, I'd say like 95% of people know what their bad habits are, know what they need to be doing to improve. But it's the other stuff that they've got going on that really prevents that. And that was certainly the case for me as well. So I think just recognizing that and then taking the steps to kind of get that under control, manage my mindset, and, you know, improve my emotional health. Then I started to do that with clients and started positioning myself more as like a coach, a health coach that helps people deal with stress. And then it just sort of morphed from there. It was like, who I really want to help is working mums, because that's where I feel like I've had the biggest transformation. I can really help people the most because I know it inside out.
Yeah.
Because since then I've started my business. I had another 2 kids. So I've got 3 kids.
Like, that's not enough for me.
Yeah. And I still work part-time as a teacher as well. So I feel really confident that I know how to help those people. So that's kind of how it evolved, I guess.
Yeah, it is so true. And I think it's really hard. Like, it's something that I've definitely resonate with is when I'm working with perimenopause women, and a lot of it all boils down to, well, obviously the impact of the fluctuations in hormones, but also where they are in their life. Like, they tend to be mums, they tend to have a lot of responsibility in their jobs. They've also got heightened responsibility, maybe dealing with like parents getting older and all that kind of stuff. And it just builds and builds and builds and builds, and it gets to the point you're like, who even am I? Like, there's the whole identity piece, there's the whole like purpose piece, and you're just getting everything shit thrown at you, like left, right, and center. So completely see that, and can see and understand how important that is. Now, I think one of the big, I don't know if this is something that you come up against, and it's something that I come up against when I'm working with women who are mums and are busy and stressed, is we have this kind of, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. Sure, like, well, all my friends are stressed and all describing these feelings. So how do people identify, A, that they are super stressed, they are super overwhelmed, and this is not something to be ignored?
Yeah. I think it comes down to the way that you feel. Like, you can ignore it, and some people do, and just like a lot of people do. Like, I think in society, it's been very, very normalized that women are stressed out of their mind all of the time. They rely heavily on alcohol to relax, heavily on caffeine to wake up in the morning. They're not where they want to be. They're chasing their tail. They're managing anything and everything. And that is normalized, like, definitely. And I think that's one of the big things that we're up against as a society, is to actually like wake people up from that and be like, that is not normal. You don't have to live like that. But I think ultimately, when you're thinking about, like, if you were a person thinking about, should I make a change? I think you just have to ask yourself the question, do I want to feel the way I feel every day? Like, am I happy feeling the way I feel? And I'm not saying every day. It's not like people are going to wake up every day and just be like, love their life. Everybody has bad days, and I'm very much a realist like that. It's not like all of these responsibilities that you have are suddenly going to disappear. Like I always say,
damn it, Jayne.
I know. And I always say to people, I'm like, look, you can't really do much to change the amount of responsibility that modern day motherhood, like as a working parent, comes with. Like, we can't just decide that we're going to stop feeding our kids, or we're going to stop like engaging with their school emails, or you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that
I
just
kind of have stopped engaging
done.
with the school emails, to be fair. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, that one is debatable, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we can't just say, like, fuck it, I'm just going to drop that. Like, there is a lot of stuff that does have to be done. And like you mentioned there, with like caring for elderly parents as well, when you're reaching this stage of life, you don't want to just drop those responsibilities. Like, it's things that are important to people. So I always say, it's not about changing that. It's about changing the way you handle it. It's like improving your emotional resilience, I call it, to just be able to do it and not feel overwhelmed, and not feel like you're chasing your tail all the time and feeling unfulfilled, stressed, a little bit on edge all the time. You're overthinking. And I think if you sit down honestly and ask yourself, am I happy with the way that I feel the majority of the time? If the answer is no, then it's probably something that you should be looking at doing something about.
yeah. And I think that emotional resilience is so powerful. And I know that's something that you'd spent a little bit of time with our membership on, because it does feel relentless for a lot of women. It does feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And when it gets to that point, but it's before that point that a change needs to happen of some description. And you're bang on the money. You can't just wave a magic wand and say, oh, well, I'm just giving up this life and I'm going to go and live in the Maldives or the Bahamas and swim with the pigs. Like, it's not going to happen. So the only thing that can change is our response to all the external things that happen. And I think, that's just, it's so important. But how do you deal with, like, when you've got clients, how do you deal with the fact that, well, certainly I don't know this for sure, but I sense this from a lot of clients, is that when a lot of people listening will go, my health is a priority. I'm getting older. I feel uncomfortable and scared. This is just what I hear from our potential clients. Yeah. But they've got the added stress, and they've got the added, like, there's so much going on. But if you say to them, you suggest like emotional health, emotional well-being, it's like, oh, it's just another thing to add to the list. It's just another thing that's going to stress me out. How do you make that connection between, well, your emotional health is your health?
Yeah. I think you can look at it from a couple of different angles. You could go into the biology of it and the fact that like what we think and how we feel is very biologically linked to how our body actually functions and the behaviors that we take every day. So like if you wanted to look at it from a physical point of view, if you are in a low state of stress and overwhelm every day, you're constantly going to be firing too much cortisol. Like you're going to be in a low level of fight or flight all the time. And I'm sure you know this with perimenopause and stuff. It's like the way that that impacts your body physiologically, like your hormones, is not great. It's going to make you more tired. It's going to make you feel like really run down, exhausted. It's going to make you crave sugar because you feel like you don't have enough energy. So those things have like an actual physical impact on our physical health. So prioritizing your emotional health is prioritizing your physical health. The other side of things is looking at, well, how does your emotional health actually prevent you from prioritizing your physical health in the way that you want? Because a lot of the women that come to me will be like, you know, I want to exercise more, I want to eat well, but I just cannot get into a rhythm. Like they'll start something, it'll go well for a few weeks, and then they fall back into old habits as soon as something happens. Like a kid is sick and they're off school for a couple of days, and then they're a little bit behind on work, and then they've got this to catch up on. And we always push ourselves to the bottom of the priority list, because if we think about what I said before in terms of like, well, what can we actually let go as a working mom? There's so much essential stuff that has to actually get done if you don't want to get fired or be a terrible parent. Then you are the first thing that drops to the bottom of the priority list. It's like, well, I can not eat properly for today, or I can drop the gym and catch up on the work that I'm behind on, or whatever. So if you look at it from that side of things, it's like if you build up your emotional capacity and your resilience to be able to handle those little ups and downs, and to be able to stay calm and focused when things don't go to plan, so that you can still get done what you need to get done, you end up creating more time for yourself. And you also have more energy, so that you can actually then go to the gym and make that meal, because you're not getting to the end of the day just feeling absolutely rinsed by life and just being like, right, give me a glass of wine, I'm absolutely done, screw this day, I want to forget it. You know, like if you can sit down and be like, yeah, today was tough, but I feel okay, you know, you have that level of acceptance, that level of self-compassion, you still have the mental capacity and the physical energy to get up and go and do what you still need to do. So it impacts it from both angles.
Yeah, so it's like everything that you're saying is exactly the same as like how we approach things. It's like it's all very well and good, you know, all these diets that you can force yourself to do and hate for a good 2 weeks when life is smooth sailing. But I always refer to like the minute you have an argument with your husband and the dog's sick and like your kid comes home with like smashed glasses or something, you're just like, back this off, I'm going to down a bottle of wine.
Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
sick. But all of the stuff that you're saying is like when we create those good habits, when we create that more those changes in our behaviors, not and you know it's building that confidence as well to, you know, I am resilient, I can do this, I don't have to rely on the wine and the crisps and whatever to make myself feel good now. And then that has that knock-on impact of sleep, which is a huge part of the stuff that I'm dealing with. And I'm sure that's probably a huge part of the stuff that your clients are dealing with as well, is when we're in that stress and overwhelm mode, our sleep quality is shit.
Yeah, well, that goes back to that fight or flight response and the low levels of cortisol that really messes with your stress. And one thing I'll add as well is just when you're talking about, you know, like eating the sugar and drinking the wine and stuff, is like we do a lot of work inside my program on safety behaviors, or buffering, some people call it. And it's like you have to be really onto yourself in terms of, when I'm stressed and overwhelmed, what do I instinctively go to make myself feel better? So for some people, it's actually like shouting or reacting to things. So like that actually, that outlet makes them feel better, like in the moment, and then they make themselves feel like crap afterwards because they feel guilty and stuff. For some, it's wine. For some, it's sugar. For some, it's like shutting themselves in a room and not speaking to anyone for a few days, just like really kind of isolating themselves. And I think when we engage, like often those behaviors are in direct contrast to the goals that we want to achieve for our life. Like, for example, if women come to you and they want to lose weight or get stronger or in the gym or whatever, and their safety behavior is binge eating cookies and drinking wine, then every time they get stressed, if they don't deal with their stress, they're going to be setting themselves back in terms of the progress that they're making for their physical health, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's actually quite a big topic. I've got a training in my membership today about self-sabotage,
Yeah.
which is like, it builds right into what you're saying about.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you had somebody come to you and say, I am stressed, I'm overwhelmed, but I just don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to start. What would your tips be?
Mm-hmm. I think firstly, the first thing that I always start with clients is like building awareness. I think a lot of people think my stress and overwhelm comes from like the things that I have to deal with, but it's not necessarily the things that you have to deal with that creates your stress and overwhelm. It's what you think about those things. So like often working mums will constantly be telling themselves things like, I don't have any time. I can't deal with this. Like, I can't cope with this. It's too much. Like, they tell themselves things like that all the time, which makes them feel really panicked. Like, a lot of working mums have a lot of anxiety. They're constantly questioning if they're doing enough. Am I doing enough at work? Do people notice that, like, I have other commitments with my kids? Is my performance the same? Am I spending enough time with my kids? Should I be doing more crafts with my kids? Like all of those.
I went through that for a good 3 years about how I wasn't
Exactly.
crafting.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's this compare and despair. And I think once you build awareness around what am I actually telling myself on a day-to-day basis, and is it helpful? Like, how is it making me feel? How is it impacting me? That can be really quite powerful, because it's just that awareness of the fact that actually I'm creating a lot of my own stress with the stories that I'm telling myself on a day-to-day basis. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can start writing your thoughts down. Like journaling, I always find is pretty good, and not, like Dear Diary kind of thing, like just literally like getting your thoughts onto paper before you go to bed, like spend 5 minutes writing it all down and just look at it and be like, is any of that true? Is it helpful? How does it make me feel when I'm like telling myself those things? Yeah, and I would say that that's the best thing to start with. First of all, is just to create a little bit of awareness around the stories that you're telling yourself all the time. Like a big one is like, I've got no time, I can't cope. Those two things, people tell themselves that all the time, and it's just like, think about how that makes you feel, and what do you do when you're thinking that? And a lot of people will be like, oh well, I think fuck it, like I'm just going to go and get a glass of wine and just like try and switch off, because it's like I can't cope, I need some space. So it's like, once you kind of catch yourself on, oh, that's what I think and that's what I do when I think that, that's powerful in itself, just having that awareness.
Yeah, I think it's really funny because that's actually something that I do in my programs as well, is that well, what are we actually telling ourselves about this, like about our bodies and about our ability to reach our health goals, and what are all these beliefs that you've built up over the years that you can't do this. It's just really interesting.
Exactly.
We're coming at it like very similar approaches for things. I love it. Right, so one of the questions I wanted to ask, and this was actually inspired by a Facebook post that I'd seen you do about mindset. And like the word mindset is used a lot. Right? And a lot of my clients or future clients come to me and they say, I need to fix my mindset. But nobody can actually identify what that means. And I thought this was something that you'd been talking about. So how do you help someone understand what their mindset is, or like how to switch their mindset?
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to two things. It's like, it's like what we were just saying before. What are you telling yourself on a regular basis? What are the stories that are constantly running in your mind? Because for most of us, it's just like a few core things that we think all the time, and everything sort of goes through those filters. So it's looking at like, what kind of filters, if you like, have you built up over time since you were a kid? It might be like you don't feel good enough, or it might be that like bad things always happen. Like there are a couple of core stories that people will tell themselves all the time, and everything that they then experience in their lives gets sort of like filtered through those core stories, and then we choose how we interpret it. So for me, it's like mindset is understanding what your kind of core stories are, and how they kind of show up on your day-to-day life in terms of your thinking. What do you think and tell yourself a lot? And then for me, the other important piece that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough and is just as important is how well do you handle your emotions? Like when you feel emotions, can you say what they are? Do you know how to process them? Or do you just do what most working mums do this day, is just like shove them down to the bottom of the pile, bury them
I'll
with
deal with that in 2032.
yeah. And try and kind of like just crack on, like pull up your bootstraps, just crack on. And I think the reason it gets a bit of a bad rep is because people are like, processing my emotions. It sounds a bit like woo-woo. Like, what am I going to just sit around and cry all day? I've got shit to do. Do you know what I mean? And it's really not about that. It's just about like understanding how you feel and giving yourselves the space to feel it. Because I think what a lot of people do is they argue against their feelings all the time. They make themselves wrong for having them. Like, for example, when people get anxious, or they're overthinking something that's been said at work, they'll be like, I just don't know why. They'll say things like, I just don't know why I can't just forget it. Like, I don't know why I'm still thinking about it. It's so annoying. Like, I'm so annoying. I'm so pathetic. Why can't I just get over it? Like, I'm trying to just move on. And really what that is just they haven't given themselves to feel what that's made them feel.
Yeah.
Whether that's like 5 or 10 minutes, just sitting with the emotion, naming it, processing it, understanding it. And then they'd be so much, like they would find it so much easier to move on. But it just gets a bit of a kind of, I think it's quite a feminine thing to feel. And I think we're very much pushed into masculinity these days. It's almost like emotions are like a taboo subject. But really, once you kind of learn how to note how you feel, deal with how you feel, it just frees up so much like mental and emotional space for you, because when you don't deal with your emotions, they stay there, they don't go anywhere, and they'll just all come exploding out at some point when you get triggered by something, or they'll manifest themselves physically with physical health problems like gut issues and chronic conditions. So I think for me, it's those three things. It's like, what are your core stories? What do you think on a day-to-day basis? And how well do you process and handle your own emotions?
Yeah. Something you just said there is actually really interesting about how we've been pushed into the masculine. Traditionally women are more in tune with themselves and their feelings, getting pushed into the masculine. Do you think there's a connection? A lot of, from a male point of view, male mental health is getting talked about so much, like, and it has been for a good couple of years. And we know that, increases of mental health diagnosis in men is through the roof. It's just quite interesting how are the women then picking up more of that? Well, we just have to get on with things now. Kind of mantle. It's a big topic. We should maybe do another podcast on that, because that could take about 3 hours.
Yeah, I agree with you though. Like, I think it's like society as a whole has just been pushed to be, it's capitalism really is what it is. It's like society as a whole is just being pushed to be productive and to make money. And that's the things that society values and places importance on and is celebrated in schools and celebrated, just in general. So it's like, are you doing loads? Are you productive? Are you making a lot of money? And if you are, then yay, you're successful. But really, what it comes down to is like people are overworked, they're burning out at unprecedented rates, and a lot of them are just miserable and unfulfilled. So it's clearly not working. I think men are being pushed to talk about their feelings all the time, and that is not, whether that is or is not helpful, I think is debatable. I think sometimes it is, but I think from my perspective anyway, what I see is men really want to feel capable. And because women have been pushed into a masculine role so much, it's almost like, well, we can do it all. Like, then the men are like, well, hello.
Yeah. Oh, I
can
totally
we support? So it's almost like society has pushed us too much to do, like, overcommit to things, do too much. So we're suffering from like massive stress, burnout, overwhelm. We're almost discouraged from sharing how we feel because we don't want to be emotional. We want to be like, more masculine. And then men are being made to feel like almost a little bit useless because it's like, well, we can do it all. And then it's just like this is a whole other
it's so interesting though, like
is,
because like when you were talking like at the very beginning like that, what is the root cause of all these women feeling stressed and overwhelmed and taking on the burden of all these different roles? And, you know, a lot of it does boil down to like society, culture,
Yeah.
and yeah, so
I think
let's,
it's like modern day motherhood too. There's just so much
yeah,
to
God.
deal with now that previous generations did not really have to deal with. Like, even if you just think about technology, like technology has such a massive impact on our lives and our kids' lives. And like even just thinking about that from a kind of one, how does it impact you at work? Like if you've got new systems to constantly look at, like AI now and like those kind of things. But then thinking about your kids with technology and how to manage that and screen time and all of that, like that wasn't really a thing 30 or 40 years ago that parents had to think about. And it's just like an extra level of like, I would say most mums will just be like thinking about that on the background. It's one of those thoughts that's just constantly on in the background every day. Like, are the kids getting too much screen time? Have they got access to something they shouldn't have access to? Are those passwords strong enough? Like, there's just loads of that type of stuff modern day, I think.
Yeah.
Loads of like added extras that we just didn't have to think about in the past, that now it's like something you have to think about on a daily basis almost. So this is why I say it's like it's not really about changing the circumstance. It's more about just raising our capacity to actually deal with everything that we have, because it is a lot. It is a lot now.
Now that I started thinking about it, now I'm like, oh shit, there's so much. Like, ah!
Even health. Like I always say, from a health perspective, like all the information now we have on health and food and nutrition is so valuable. It's so great. But it's also just so bloody overwhelming
I know.
sometimes
Well,
to
that's
think
my
like,
post that I did on Facebook today. It's like knowledge is
yeah,
not the issue. Like we've got more knowledge
mm-hmm,
about nutrition and health and than we know what to
exactly.
do with. That's not the issue. We can go and find out everything we need. Like, we can go and learn how to bloody fly a plane using
Yeah,
Google. Like we're not going to do it, but you know, knowledge isn't the issue. It's the like, well, how do we make these things work for me as an individual and my lifestyle and
yeah,
my family and my house and my dog and all the things that I've got to do. And that's the challenge. Um,
exactly.
and like I say, this is one of the big things my clients say is I know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, well, you know, there's actually a little bit of adjustments needed to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do the right thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
right. So how can people find you?
Mm-hmm.
How can they find out more about what you do? Do you have any freebies? Do you have any programs that are coming up? What's going on?
Yeah. So my Instagram handle is at Jayne Hughes Coaching.
I will put
And
that in the show notes, people.
okay, yeah, and I'm on Facebook under the same, Jayne Hughes Coaching. Then my website is www.livelongandlush.com. So we could pop that in the show notes as well. And I have a whole page of free resources there of things to kind of like just different ways that you can look at your like emotional health. There's a couple of different freebies on there that are there to download. And I think by the time this podcast comes out in a couple of weeks, I will be launching my first group program, which I'm super excited about.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. So I know that that's something that people have been saying they would have liked for a while. So I normally work with people one-to-one, and they're always like, it'd be so nice if there was like a group, that could get together. So yeah, that's going to be
So
launching at the end of
exciting.
March. Yes, I know.
Congratulations. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, my lovely. Well, thank you very much for coming on. It is such an important topic, and I just love how we've got so much in common. We do very different things, but
Mm-hmm.
what we teach ultimately is the same thing,
Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
coming at it from different angles.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show people that, it's not just me banging on about this stuff. It's like so
Yeah. No.
important. But lovely to have you on. And if you do, I'll put the links to Jayne's Instagram and our website below. And I doubt we'll have, if you've got your page ready for your group program, whatever, we can pop that in as well if needs be.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay.
That'd be
Fab.
fabulous. Right. Any questions for either of us? DM us. Please like, share, comment, do all the things. Let everybody know about the podcast. The more ears on us, the better, quite frankly. Because we're gonna we can just change the world.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jayne. It was lovely to have you on, and I'll
Thanks for
speak to you
having
soon,
me.
everyone.
Bye.
And just like that, we have spiced up another episode of Piss Off Perimenopause and the musings of a bullshit queenager. Massive shout out and a huge thank you for hanging out with me today. I really hope you've been entertained. And remember, don't be shy, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, keep those heels high and standards higher. Remember, it's all about glowing, growing, and downright owning it. So catch you on the flip side, and don't forget to click the link in the show notes to get your freebie.